welcome to Teaching Melissa until we have a better name. This is the second episode. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
And last week, we spoke about why study how the mind works. We spoke about the fact that the mind has a mechanism. We spoke about language and the importance of language. And we spoke about labels, right?
Yes.
We spoke about labels, about the fact that we are conscious of ourselves because we are able to speak, because we're able to recognize speech, right?
Right, and
If we
share
don't-
the understanding.
Yeah, if we don't label something, then it doesn't exist. So, what do we want to do today? Today we want to talk about the structure of the mind. The mind has a mechanism. It has a structure. And it's self-evident. The second you see it, it just pops out like an object in a three-dimensional painting. And it's very important to experience it ourselves. We cannot prove that there is a structure and a mechanism to the mind. Why? Because the only way to experience the mind is by experiencing it. Okay? It's like love. When we try to convince people that love exists, the more we try to convince them that we love them, the less they'll believe us. It's one of those things that we just have to see for ourselves. But the second that we see that there's a structure and a mechanism to the mind, it becomes self-evident. And we become enthralled and in awe of its simplicity and beauty. Or at least us geeks do. It's like, oh, this show, Teaching Melissa Until We Have a Better Name, is a show for Smarties who are interested in maximize their mental potential by learning how their mind works. Okay, so how do we find the structure and the mechanism of the mind? I mean, how do we do that? Well, the only way to figure it out is to think about it. Because the only mind that we have access to is our own. It's like I can't go into your mind and try to figure out what happens there. It's an impossibility. And you can't go into my mind. We have only access to our own mind. Well, that poses a big problem. And the reason it poses a problem is because every mind's different. But how do I know that the color red that you perceive as red is my color red? We already know, and we spoke last week in detail, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, about the fact that some people are blind in their mind's eye. And we've only discovered that in 2014, 2015, right, as a collective.
Right.
We spoke about the fact that some people are deaf in their mind's ear. We spoke about the fact that some people perceive time differently than others. That's another thing we spoke about in the first episode, that time is the hidden spectrum of the mind, the anchor on which the mind pivots. Okay? How do we know how to navigate if we only have access to our own mind? It's almost like you throw someone in the middle of the ocean and you tell them, oh, navigate your way around. It says, how? Well, he or she has to know to follow the northern star. If they don't even know what the northern star is, they're not aware of the fact that such a thing exists, that compass exists, that there's a north, south, east, and west, they're not going to be able to navigate their ways. And even after they know, they need to acquire the skill. They need to become a little more proficient in it because it's an art, not just a science. And it's the same with the mind. If we are to navigate the mind, we have to find the northern star. Well, the northern star of the mind is time. Our perception of time. And so we need to understand this because this is the most important point. We always can go back to time. And if we go back to time, we realize where we are. Because that's our northern star. Okay? So how do we divide time? So we spoke about it last time. This is a spectrum of time. Of course, it's infinite, so it keeps going this way and that way. This is our perception of time. So time is slower when we go this way. Maybe I'll switch to red because it's kind of hard to see. You'll figure it out. Yeah. slow, fast. The slower time seems to pass. I'm sorry, let me start again. The faster we think time is passing, the slower our time perception. That is, if my time perception is slower, I actually think that time goes by faster. So I'm like, oh, it's been like 2 hours. And then I look at the clock and it's been only an hour. And I'm like, oh my God, well, my time perception is slower. And when I'm in a movie, and the movie is super exciting, and I was like, oh my God, it's already been 2 hours? It felt like 5 minutes. My perception of time is faster, and time is actually, time is moving faster than I thought it was. So I think that time goes slower than it is. Right. So the faster time goes, the slower our perception, until time stops altogether. When do we say that time stops? Oh my God, I thought I'm going to die. Time just froze. When we're super intensely going through a bad experience, when there's an intruder in the house, God forbid, and you're hiding from them, and their footsteps, and you're hiding under the bed, and their footsteps are there, and you hold your breath, and time just stops. Or when, like I'm giving bad examples, right? But why? Because when bad things happen, our mind races.
Right.
I remember this one time at band camp, I was in an accident. I love that you're laughing, you know what the joke is. This one time, I'm heading out of work in my big old Ford Bronco. And, it's a green light. And I'm just like, it goes slowly, I'm putting it into gear, and I'm just starting to go, and suddenly I see a bus coming. It's like 6 p.m., and it's nighttime. And he's not stopping. And it's raining. And it just clicked. He's going to hit me. He did not realize it's a red light for him, and he's going to hit me. And time slowed down. My life flashes in front of me. And I'm literally thinking, what to do? Oh, let me turn the wheel this way so I don't go towards him. And let me take the foot off the pedal so that, there's at least attached as possible, and so that I don't get the jolt. And, okay, this is it.
Right.
Boom, lifts me in the air, boom, like that. And I turn 90 degrees and, just keep going. And I'm like, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
Right? Time slows down. Now, my friend who's in the car behind me, leaving the parking lot of my job at the exact same time, he's saying, here's what happened. You went out and you disappeared. It was like that. It's like, wow, time slowed down. To me, it felt like at least 20 seconds.
Right.
Maybe 12, but at least 12. It's like, it was time. Time was passing. My mind was racing. Our thought, and this is something, I say science says. This is something, if you Google what creates our perception of time, it sounds so logical. The faster the thought, time slows down. Our perception of time slows down. But if you Google what creates our perception of time, you're not going to find this information in Wikipedia. Why? Because until time polarization theory was published last September by Consciousness Research Institute in Spokane, Washington, this was not common knowledge. But it makes so much sense because we've all been there. We've all experienced it. When we're sitting in the DMV and we have nothing to do, the mind races, time goes by slower, right? So, time, and that's very important. So, let's talk about the structure of the mind. How do we divide it? How do we tell the sailor in the ocean, in our cosmic conscious solitude, what to look for? And so, here we go to a very basic, where's my eraser? I know I have an eraser somewhere because I used it. Oh, here it is. What we're doing here is going back to one of the basic laws of metaphysics. One of the basic laws of metaphysics, there's, multiple accounts on how many more laws of metaphysics there are.
Sure.
But in general, the answer is usually 7. But depends if you go to occultism or hermetism or Hebrew wisdom or philosophy or whatever you go, you're going to find different rules. Sometimes you're going to find a lot more rules. In some channeling literature, they tell you there's only one rule, the law of one.
Right.
Everything is one, and then everything else is a distortion of that law. So it's like, oh, there's all these laws. We're going to just name one law today. We're going to call it the law of polarity. And the law of polarity states that, everything in the known universe, in the metaphysical universe, as well as in the physical universe, is masculine, both masculine and feminine. Everything is a thesis and an antithesis. Everything is up and down. Everything is yes and no. There are 2 types of people in the world. It's a very, very strong statement to say. There's 2 types of people. What are you talking about? There's gazillion types of people in the world. I have to check what time it is. What time did we start? Let's say 7 minutes ago?
12 minutes ago, it says.
Oh, right. Hello. I have a timer. See how I got distracted?
Yeah.
I was talking about time. I was thinking about something else. Where was I? I was talking about the law of polarity.
There's 2.
There's 2. It's a very strong statement to say there's 2 types of people in the world. No, Aerez, there's infinite types of people in the world. Well, I stand behind my statement. There's 2 types of people in the world. People who have seen this episode and people who have not.
Sure.
It's a fact.
Right.
There is no in between. You haven't seen it or you haven't. Okay? So everything in the world can be divided into 2. You're either happy or you're not. I'm a little bit happy. Okay, well, you're happy, You're either, your perception of time is either fast or slow. Now, that's comparative. But still, there's 2.
At some point, you cross the threshold of one side or the other.
Exactly. The event horizon, right? The middle of the magnet. The magnet is either masculine or feminine, either positive or negative. Just like the Earth, you're either below the equator or you're above the equator. You cannot be on both. Oh, I'm going to stand right on the equator, leg with each side. Okay, well, you're in both sides of the equator. Great. But, you can't stay there for long. And in fact, there at any given time, if we actually count the molecules in your body, there is a part of you that's a little more in the southern hemisphere than the northern hemisphere, right? So there's always 2, the law of polarity. And now that law is very, very important because it dictates so many other rules, like the law of rhythm. Everything goes up must come down. And the law of correspondence, which says that as above, so below. And there's all these beautiful rules and so on and so forth. Now, the laws of metaphysics are the opposite from the law of physics. And I'm going to give one example, and I'm just taking a little bit of a side note here just because it's interesting.
Okay.
And we mentioned laws of metaphysics, so I want to talk about what they are. For example, the second law of motion says, I think it's the second, if not, tell me in the comments, and air is no good, but I'm a metaphysicist, not a physicist. But the second law of motion, I think, says that everything strives to stop and only moves if it's being moved by a different force. That is, if you roll a ball, eventually it'll come to stop, right? And for something to move, it has to have some kind of a different power operate on it. Well, the law of physics, metaphysics, there's a law that exactly the opposite of this. In metaphysics, everything has its own power. Everything fuels itself and everything strives to go back to itself. It's never going to stop. It's going to keep going until it comes back, and then it's going to start all over again like a circle. Everything is powered by itself. Okay? And it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because it's the antithesis of physics. Same thing with the law of physics. You have all these different systems, the way things operate. If you're a doctor, you want to study how to operate on the liver and on the internal organs, you're going to study very different things than someone who is a brain doctor. Right? I mean, there's going to be a basics that's the same, but
right.
The laws, what you're going to study when you go do woodworking is going to be very different than what you're going to study if you're going to study hang gliding.
Right.
Why? Because there's different laws to learn and all these. In metaphysics, there's only one blueprint to study. Because everything works the exact same way. You work by the law of polarity. And so our mind, too, our consciousness, our mind, our emotions, our spirituality, our sexuality, you name it. Every metaphysical term, even love. You either love someone or you hate them. And then there's the entire spectrum in between. Everything is based on the law of polarity. So already we know we have two sides to our minds, and we know that there's an event horizon between them. And so let's name them. Now, naming is everything. We learned that in the previous
Naming
episode.
is everything.
Naming is everything. Why? Because it's very easy to connect with a particular name. It's very hard to connect with a different name. You know, and everybody has their own names for how they call things.
Right.
And when it comes to the mind, that's such a subjective and such a, how are we going to call it, abstract, amorphous concept. It's tricky. You know, we said last time, ask 10 people what consciousness is, you're going to get 20 different answers.
Right.
So, we're just going to make some decisions, but we're going to also show over the course of this episode that there's multiple names for both these sides of the mind. Now, no, I take it back.
New approach.
New approach. If you pay close attention to what is happening in your mind, you're going to realize that you're perceiving reality with two separate tracks. The first track is called the voluntary track. Okay? Which obviously, because of the law of polarity, the second track will be the involuntary track. Let us start with a voluntary track. What does it mean, a voluntary track? Well, it's thoughts that are voluntary. What does it mean, voluntary? It means that our willpower guides them, powers them, dictates them. There's something that you want and you're trying to achieve. And because you're trying to achieve it, you're thinking about it. For example, maybe I'm thinking about what I want. I want to make soup, a Yemenite soup. So I need cilantro and I need, how do you call that yellow spice that's super yellow? Turmeric. And I need chicken. And I need onions, and I'm making the list in my head, and when am I going to go to the store? I don't feel like going to the store. It's a sequential thought. Why am I say sequential? Because it takes time to think it.
Right.
It's sequential in time, and it's voluntary. It's happening because there's something I want or there's something I don't want. Maybe I want, so we're going to call this the voluntary mind. And I'm going to write this. Let's just name it voluntary for now. Okay. Is that how you spell voluntary?
Looks good to me.
Okay. So the voluntary mind is when we think about something that we want or we don't want. For example, given another couple of examples, I want to get a raise. So I'm thinking in my head, what am I going to tell my boss and how am I going to convince him? Maybe I should tell him this, maybe I should tell him that. Should I approach him today? Should I approach him tomorrow? Blah, 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 blah. I'm spending minutes upon minutes in thinking about how I'm going to ask for my boss for a raise. Maybe there's something I don't want. Freud told us that our mind is busy either going towards what it wants or away from what it doesn't. It's a fact. It's just the way the voluntary mind works. Which means that there's a voluntary thought stream. Maybe I don't want to be seen by my boss today, because I just called in sick, but I'm not really sick, and I'm at the mall, and I'm like, I really hope my boss is like, does he come to this mall? Does he not come to this mall? There's something I'm trying to avoid, and I'm thinking about it.
Right.
Okay? So these are the voluntary thoughts. Now, we already mentioned that the voluntary thoughts are sequential in time. The faster the voluntary thought is, the slower our perception of time. Okay? So, did I show you how I do this? I did, didn't I?
You did show me. I think it might have been in our pre-episode, though.
Oh, that was in the pre-episode, so what you're saying is that people didn't see it.
I think people did not see it.
All right, check this out. Check out my super cool... see, I was saying amazing things about myself, and then it bit me in the ass. Ha. Voila.
Winning.
What?
Winning.
Come on. I want to get to a point where I do it so fast. Okay, so. Aha. So, this way is faster, this way will be slower. The voluntary mind, just like everything, we have a spectrum. So, slower.
Slower perception or slower thought?
Our voluntary thought stream is slower,
okay.
Which means time
perception is
seems
faster.
The perception of time is faster.
Okay.
Oh my God, it's been 2 hours?
Okay.
Unbelievable. Like, time just disappears. But if the voluntary thought is faster, thank you, this is not time, this is the voluntary thought stream. Thought is voluntary, goes faster, and goes slower.
Perfect.
So the faster the thought goes, the slower our time perception, and the slower our voluntary thought stream is, time goes faster. So, are we clear on what's the voluntary thoughts
Yes.
are? Okay.
I feel clear on that, yeah.
We can detect them. Usually, I'm going to speak about it a little more. Usually, the voluntary thoughts are heard like an inner dialogue of sort. But people who are mentally deaf, we already know from last episode that some people are mentally deaf, do not hear their inner dialogue. When we are thinking about a conversation that we had with someone, we're literally hearing it as an inner dialogue. Some people actually hear the voices of the people who spoke. I hear it as this muted, super far away type of, inner dialogue, and it's just like out there, and it's a very, very low volume, and yet it trumps every other noise. I can be in the middle of the street in Delhi, everybody's honking, and I can still hear my inner dialogue, even though that it's absolutely muted and I have no access to control the volume of it. Some people hear their inner dialogue and they can raise and lower the volume. I can't. So, and there's a reason for that, but we're not going to go there now, also because I'm not quite sure about what it is. I have a hypothesis, so I don't want to go there. So that's the voluntary thought. And one more thing I'm going to say about the voluntary thought. Mm-hmm. There's one more characteristic that is critically important to mention. The voluntary thought always uses language, uses labels. I have to go to the store, I have to get cilantro, uses names, uses labels. Okay? When we're thinking about something, I really hope my boss is not going to see me at the mall. It's language. We think using language. So let's write down the characteristics of the voluntary thoughts. We said that they are
sequential.
We said that they use language.
They come from will.
They're powered by will. That's very important. Which means we have control over them, even though that usually we don't quite control them. They can be powered by our willpower. They're voluntary. Because soon I'm going to delete this and give it a name. Give that part of the mind a name. Powered by will, voluntary, sequential in time, which means they have various speeds. they can be accelerated and they can be slowed down. How would we call something that...
Decelerated.
Well, how do we call something that can be either accelerated or decelerated? I guess sequential in time covers that, right?
Yeah.
Because if something is sequential in time,
it can go.
Yeah, it can go faster or slower. It has a speed. It has a speed. Another piece of the puzzle that's very important about the voluntary mind is that...
So maybe it is another piece, because it's sequential, but it's also temporal then, right? Like it matters how fast it goes. It's a piece of it.
Yeah, temporal? What's temporal?
Maybe I want to know if I'm using the right word.
Yeah. You know what word I'm looking for,
yeah.
But we don't know what it is. It's like, you see, we're thinking. We're thinking about it, right? Maybe it'll come involuntarily.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
It has a tempo. It's temporal. Maybe that's it. Maybe. Yeah, okay. I'll sit on it.
There's one more piece that's very important, but for some reason it flew out of my mind. I'm sure it'll come soon. So, if that's the voluntary mind, that means that there's yet another track to our thoughts. And if you pay attention, if you really pay close attention to it, you're going to notice that some of your mental phenomena is involuntary. What does it mean involuntary? How do we distinguish between voluntary and involuntary? When we don't know how to distinguish, we always go back to our northern star. Time. Involuntary thoughts are always instantaneous. Always. It's a rule. So, we're going to say, I never know what colors to use. We said that last week, didn't I?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to look exactly the same, but whatever. Instantaneous. What does it mean, instantaneous? It means that if I'm in the mall and I see my boss walking towards me, I have a slew of mental sensations that are hitting me like a ton of bricks that I don't have to think, oh, this is my boss, and he's gonna
walk up to me and see me, and then I'm going, yeah.
Yeah. Another piece of the puzzle is that whatever comes to me instantaneously is always figurative. So, for example, a lot of people, their instantaneous thoughts, their involuntary thought, let's add the word involuntary. They get their involuntary thoughts as an image in their mind's eye. Some people don't. People who are aphantasiacs like me, people who are mentally blind, don't see anything in their mind's eye, but we still get the sensation, the mental sensation. And so it's figurative. Maybe I can see my boss screaming at me in his office, in my mind's eye. Maybe I can, somebody tells me a story. Let's assume that most people are visual in their mind's eye. When somebody tells you a story, you start seeing imagery in your mind's eye. Those images are usually involuntary. They just come. Even if you're guiding your mind's eye with your voluntary mind, saying, oh, how do I want to build this machine that I'm building? And what shall I do? Oh, maybe I connect this piece here and this piece there. You're doing it in your mind's eye. But whatever is manifesting, you're saying, oh, maybe I should go to the Eiffel Tower. Boom, a picture of the Eiffel Tower appears in your mind's eye. Well, the picture of the Eiffel Tower that's going to appear in your mind's eye is not the picture you choose. It's whatever picture that something chooses. Whatever that something is not really you. It's a part of you, but it's not the you that is you. Okay? So we're going to talk about what that you is in a second. Right? But whatever it is, it has a mind of its own. If you happen to see the Eiffel Tower last month, then maybe the mental imagery that this part of you will bring is going to be the mental picture that you took last month. But if not, if you only saw a crumbled picture of the Eiffel Tower and you only heard about it when you were a kid and always wanted to visit, then that's the picture that's going to keep coming.
Sure.
And if you're a visual thinker, somebody who sees visual but only as outlines, as rough outlines, maybe they're blurry, that's the Eiffel Tower you're going to see. But it's involuntary. Okay? So figurative. Why do we say figurative? Because let's say I say, hey, think about fairness. I think I gave you that example once in a lecture that I did. It's like, I say, think about fairness. Fairness is an abstract term. Remember last episode we were talking about the more abstract something is, the more timeless it is. So the more timeless something is, the harder it is to create a specific image of it. If I say, hey, the Eiffel Tower, we all see the Eiffel Tower in our mind's eye, those who can see, and those who can't, think about the Eiffel Tower. There's a specific Eiffel Tower. But if we're talking about if we're talking about fairness, everybody's going to think about something different is going to come to us in our mind's eye or as a mental perception. When I think about fairness, I think about two kids, splitting a sandwich. Or I'm thinking about, everybody gets $100,000 from the father who died and left. Everybody gets the same amount of money. Everybody has a different figurative image from the word imagination, not from the word a visual image.
Right.
Because this particular side of the mind produces the imagination. And hence, for most people, it's imagery. Okay? This part of the mind, and that was the word I was looking for before but did not have, the voluntary side of the mind is not figurative. It is always literal. I'm going to go to the store and get cilantro. I don't have cilantro. I need cilantro. It is always rational. Okay? It is always algorithmic. This part of the mind, it's not rational what you're going to see in your mind's eye. You might be seeing pink elephants. Pink elephants are not rational. They're figurative. Right? If I say, hey, think of a tower. I saw the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower is a figurative tower for the term tower.
Sure.
And so, figurative. Let's see. It does not use language. It uses some kind of a sensation or an imagery. It uses imagination. And it is power. Do you want to take a guess what powers the involuntary mind?
It's will versus desire.
Desire. What happens when you're hungry and you're thinking about hunger? If you're a visual person, suddenly you're going to see this food that you want to eat. And it's just going to come to you. It's involuntary. It's like, I'm thirsty. Water.
Right.
I want to drink this. I want to drink that. The voluntary mind is guided by desire. Okay? Now, let's name them. Because it doesn't matter who you are. I don't care if you're Chinese. I don't care if you're black, if you're white, if you're a Jew, if you're an Arab, if you're I don't care. I don't care how old you are. If you are human, you have two sides to your minds, which, we can say abstractly that you have two minds. We are of two minds, all of us. When it comes to the mind is androgynous. There's a masculine and a feminine piece. And if you're human, you're thinking in the same manner. You're not thinking in the same manner, but the mechanism of your mind is the same. And so we have to give the two parts of the mind, or the two minds that create our conscious perception of reality, we have to give it names, because names are important. Until we're going to name them together, they're not going to exist. Because you can walk all day and think, my mind, it's really, my mind is like two sides of a magnet, and, the positive electromagnetic polarity of my mind is voluntary, and the negative electromagnetic polarity of my mind is involuntary. Well, that's not very efficient, right? So we're going to give it a name. And I'm going to let you choose Melissa because this is about teaching Melissa.
All right.
And so I'm going to give you a whole bunch of names
All right.
for the voluntary mind and a whole bunch of names for the involuntary mind.
Okay.
And you're going to choose the name that you want us to use consistently in this series.
All right.
And everybody else is going to have to suck it up. And if for some reason you're going to choose one that I think is not efficient,
Sure.
I will let you know.
Okay.
So, this part of the mind is called very differently, depends on the methodology and the system of knowledge that you will find. I'm going to use the color red because the fire always
I really
goes...
thought just then that that's what you were saying the name of it was.
What?
Very system... Depending on what system...
Oh, that was the name?
Like,
How
I
smart
don't
you-
want that one.
Oh, that's not a good name. How smarty of you.
Yeah.
How literal of you.
How literal, yes.
So, for example, in Chinese philosophy, this mind is called yin.
Okay.
In the Bible, this mind is called Adam. In Jewish mythology. In Hebrew wisdom. Sort of. In Hebrew wisdom, really, officially in Hebrew wisdom, this mind is called the letter He. The letter He is the 5th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. That's another name for this mind. Another name for this mind is in occultism. In occultism, this mind is called reason. In tarot, this mind is called the emperor. Pieces are starting to connect,
Yeah,
right?
they are.
Because we all know. Okay, what else? In Kabbalah, this mind is called Chokhmah, which is smartiness. A lot of Kabbalah books will translate it to wisdom. It is not true. And if you see a book of Kabbalah that translates Chokhmah to wisdom, it's missing the point. Because wisdom is something very different. Being wise is something very different than being smart. So Chokhmah, which is also this sphere right here, you see that this word right here is similar to what I just wrote on the board. And you say it says Chokhmah. See, it says Adam here. Okay, so that's in Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, it also has another name, which is Abba, which translates to father. Father and mother. Okay, we all have a father and a mother in our mind. In metaphysics, in practical metaphysics, this mind is called the positive electromagnetic polarity of the mind, or the masculine mind. The masculine is always the positive, the power giver. The feminine is always the receptive, the power receiver. You know, woman always wants more. Oh, build this room. Oh, build the quintessential woman. Not every woman. Women's that are smarties, sometimes it's reversed. But, you know, the quintessential, now I'm going to have like hateful comments on YouTube. But when we go back to the ancient times, the quintessential man, quintessential woman, you know, masculine. What else? It just goes on and on. Oh, Christianity. Let's do Christianity. In Christianity, the masculine mind, the voluntary mind is called, care to take a guess? A guest? Care to take a guess?
A guest from the guest? No, I don't. Adam, I assume. The Son.
You have the Father, you have the Son, and you have the
Makes
Holy
sense.
Spirit.
All right. But it's the Father. I can't remember where that was. That from
The Father is from Kabbalah.
Kabbalah.
And so there's a skewness in the
Understanding of those two concepts. Okay.
It really depends. It depends on what type of Christianity. There are Christian books that I've read, especially Gnostic Christianity, that would say that this is the Father and this is the Holy Ghost, and the Son is what in Kabbalah going to be considered to be Da'at, which is the combination of the two, because it's the birth.
Sure.
What's being birthed by the mother and the father, the Son. So possibility. Okay. So it's confusing because there's so many names.
Right.
There's so many names. Okay. So in my book, It's About Time, I called it Adam and Eve.
Right.
Why? Because we all know Adam and Eve. And because the story of creation is a metaphor, it's a figurative metaphor to how the mind works. And so by using Adam and Eve, we can refer back continuously to the story of creation, whether we're religious or not. And notice if you have a little resistance to use the name because it's from the Bible. Just because we're not religious doesn't mean that theology doesn't have anything to teach us. Theology is the ancient science of our forefathers. They did not speak literally and abstractly in those days. You cannot find documentation from the old days that speak literally and abstractly as science does today. And so they spoke in metaphors. And because they spoke in metaphors, mostly concrete metaphors, everything got a name. Adam and Eve. Okay? And so it's powerful to let go of that piece of judgment. And so let's do the names for Eve. And we're going to do the names in blue because Eve is water, Adam is fire. Remember, water always goes down, fire always goes up. This is why, by the way, in Hebrew wisdom, you have two triangles. You have this triangle that indicates fire. Fire always goes up, hence the point of the triangle goes up.
Sure.
And you have water, which is the bottom, the triangle that points downward. It's indicating the two minds. The fiery mind, which is the mind that thinks. The mind is, electrical. We think using neurons. It's electricity. And the body is water. And then you have the whatever in the middle, which is the dot, which is the creation that we cannot see. It is us. It's our consciousness. Our consciousness is metaphysical. We cannot see it. But this is why the Star of David is indicated that way. Okay? And the idea is to balance them both. So let's give all the names. So you choose one, name it, and tell me what you think the opposite is.
Okay. So yin, I'm going to go on a wild guess and go yang.
Yes. Can we see the blue? Yes, good enough.
Reason, I think maybe intuition.
Oh, beautiful. That moment before you see your boss in the mall. You're like, oh, I hope I'm not going to see the boss in the mall. Oh, here's my fuck yeah, I knew it. Intuition. Intuition. People say, oh, intuition doesn't exist. What do we think intuition is? Intuitive. Intuition always comes instantaneously.
Yeah.
Always. What else?
Adam, Eve.
Eve.
I don't know tarot. Emperor and the Fool? I don't know.
What's the feminine side of the emperor?
The Empress.
Aha.
Empress. So masculine and feminine. The father and the mother.
Notice that mother in German is Mater. The word matter comes from German.
Interesting.
Yes, why? Because the body is matter. The mind is not. Okay? Mother. See how it all connects?
I do.
So, in Hebrew wisdom, I'll help you. It's the letter Daled. Dalet.
Okay. Bina? Is that what that says up there?
Bina, yes. Bina.
Bina.
Bina means wisdom. In a lot of Kabbalah books in English, it's reversed. They call Chokhmah wisdom, and they call Bina understanding.
Huh.
No. Bina means wisdom. Chokhmah, I don't know how to translate it. Smartness.
Okay.
You know, you're either smart or you're wise. Okay?
All right.
Or both. Bina.
The son, the daughter. I don't know. Or is it...
Well, that's going to be the Holy Spirit.
Oh,
So let's assume it's the Father.
that's the Christian,
Yes,
right?
and the
Okay.
Holy Spirit. Mother Nature. Mother Nature is, it doesn't matter what system of knowledge you go to, matter is always considered feminine. Always.
Okay.
Okay, Mother Earth, right? Did we cover them all? I mean, there's just so many. There's so many more that I just can't think of right now. Reason, rationale. You know, you have. Let me show you the Empress and the Emperor. You can see that there's the 22 lines on the tree of life correspond to the 22 Hebrew letters, and here's the letter Dalet, and here's the letter. Where's the letter Hey? Hey, right here. In tarot, the 22 tarot cards correspond to the 22 Hebrew letters. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Dalet is the Empress. Hey is the Emperor. In tarot, the 7, this is called the tarot tableau, whatever how you pronounce it. The first one, the Fool, is you. That's your consciousness. You can think of it as dot here. Okay? Or think of it as the letter Aleph in Hebrew. Okay? And there's a reason for that. By the way, the letter Aleph, if you look at it, you can see that it's actually made out of a... The letter Aleph is made out of it's called a parallelogram. A parallelogram always indicates the body. And then there is a little letter Yod, which is the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Here it is right here. So on the letter Aleph, there's a Yod that comes from the top, and there's a Yod that goes from the bottom, a reversed Yod, and it creates the letter Aleph to indicate... Just like they say in the East, there's the body and then the energy that goes in from the top and the energy that goes in from the bottom, meeting at the base of the coccyx. And the whole idea of the spiritual journey is to raise it to the pineal gland. Hence the letter Aleph. It shows the body, and it doesn't matter what, and it shows the energy that goes from the top and the energy that goes from the bottom. The little letter Yod is indicating a spark of energy. And then you can see that all the Hebrew letters are essentially an amalgamation of these same shapes. For example, the letter Bet, here's the parallelogram, and here the spark went down all the way to the body. And there's a reason. Every letter has its own symbolic meaning. And so going back to tarot, this is what we were talking about. The first letter is Aleph, that's you. The first 7, the next 7 set of 7 letters are essentially symbolizing the various pieces, the various components of your mind, how your mind works. This, for example, I mean, it's a piece of the masculine mind. It's indicating a specific piece. This is the superconscious mind, which is the mind that we all share. When you think of the Eiffel Tower, we all think of the same Eiffel Tower. It's a piece of the collective mind. That's the high priestess. These two, Adam and Eve, the voluntary and the involuntary parts of your mind. The Hierophant is considered, this is what in Christianity is called the Father. This is why it's so confusing, because everybody gives it a different name. And then, hence, nobody fucking knows what's going on, right? But the Father is the Hierophant, which is in common day spirituality in the consciousness movement, is called the higher self. And there's a technicality of what the higher self is. The lovers is when the mind is joint. And you can see by the card, it's the masculine and feminine joined together in balance. And then you have the chariot, and I'm not going to go into what it is right now, but it's a particular state of consciousness that has to do with the amalgamation of all of them together. Something has to do with the pineal gland, with the pituitary gland, and one more. Okay? So these 7 cards indicate the structure of the mind. These 7 cards indicate the 7 laws of metaphysics that works on consciousness at any given time. These 7 indicate the 7 steps in human consciousness development, in how to develop the mind in a particular way. All spiritual systems say the same. So, we have to choose a name that we're going to use on an ongoing basis to speak about the 2 parts of our minds, so that we can refer to it. We can say the voluntary mind. We can say whatever we want. What do you like?
I like masculine and feminine. That works for me.
Okay. I love it, because I think masculine and feminine is the best choice. It's the choice of, I think, for this particular series. Why?
Sure.
Because first of all, it opens a huge door to speak about masculine and feminine, what masculine and feminine is. And we all have a different perception of what masculine and feminine is.
Sure.
And different people think about it differently. And especially in today's Me Too movement and, something male movement. I can't remember. There's a whole male movement that corresponds
talking about gender and all
that.
that.
Yeah, talking about gender equality. We lost the meaning of what masculine and feminine means in the original archetypal concept of reality. So it opens a door to speak about that. It's how Hermetism uses these terms. It calls it the masculine and the feminine mind.
I don't know what Hermetism is.
So Hermetism is... So there was a guy called... I'm going to try to do this. I'm an abstract thinker, don't remember a name. There was a guy in ancient Egypt, and I'm talking before the time of the Israelites in Egypt. So we're talking 6,000 years ago. His name was Hermes Trismegistus.
Huh?
I did it!
Wow, Trismegistus.
Trismegistus. Why?
Okay.
Tris means 3.
Okay.
Megistus means great. He was so great that they called him the triple great. It is said that even Abraham, which in Judaism considered the most enlightened individual in Hebrew history, in Hebrew wisdom, that was before Judaism was created.
Right.
Abraham is the father of the Arabs and the Jews and the Christians. Okay? It says that Abraham has learned from Hermes Trismegistus. It is said that all the knowledge of the East, and I'm going to get flaming messages from all yogis, it says that all knowledge of the East came from Egypt, from Hermes Trismegistus. And so Hermetism is the ancient knowledge that he taught. Okay? And in Hermetism, so there's all kind of books about Hermetism, and from Hermetism you have occultism, and you have Judaism, and you have the Hebrew wisdom, and you have, you name it. Okay? Now, it's tricky to say what comes first, Hermetism or Hebrew wisdom. I like to call it Hebrew wisdom, and that's why I call this knowledge Hebrew metaphysics. Why? Because the Hebrew language is the Hebrew language. Hermetism is a name of a person. And so that person learned it somehow. Well, he probably learned it using the Hebrew language. We know that the Hebrew language existed at that time, in the time of Mesopotamia. And so I rather go by the Hebrew knowledge. But the masculine and feminine is wonderful because the masculine and feminine encompasses everything else. You say masculine, you're talking about the emperor. If you say masculine, you're talking about Abba, father. If you say masculine, you're talking about reason. Oh man, they're always so fucking logical, Women are irrational. Yeah, but women are intuitive. You always have to have both. I have a tight muscle today. You always have to have both. The yin is the masculine principle in Chinese philosophy. Okay? You have the Ida and Pingala in Hinduism, which are the 2 channels that start at the base of the coccyx and weave in and out until they meet in the pineal gland. Oh, we forgot 2 very important names. The sun, in astrology, and astronomy, the sun and the moon. We all know that the moon is considered feminine.
Yeah.
Okay? Luna.
Yeah.
You know? It's lunacy to allow the involuntary mind to control us. Okay? But if the sun cannot function without the moon. The moon decides the cycles. The inner cycle of the earth are determined by the moon, the tides, and the what's the opposite of tide?
I don't.
Like water, tide goes in.
The tide goes in and out.
Oh, okay. The tide is the ebb and flows.
There we go.
Of the tides are determined by the moon. The sun and the moon in astrology and in ancient astronomy are essentially names for the two minds.
Okay.
And in fact, it is also in the Hebrew wisdom, because you can see the 7 double letters are actually symbolizing the 7 visible planets, quote unquote. In Hebrew wisdom, the earth and the moon are also planets. And then you have the 3 that are not visible, or whatever, right? So, okay, we're going to call it masculine and feminine, and voila. My intuition allowed me to write masculine and feminine as the 2 polar opposites of the mind. And so, what's the difference? What's the number one difference between the masculine and the feminine mind?
The number one difference?
Yeah, the quintessential, there's so many differences, the voluntary, the this, the that. What is the most important, the anchor by which we distinguish between the two?
I don't know. Will and desire, is it on the list? The masculine and the feminine, the main difference between the two is going to be intuition and reason.
In doubt, you always go back to time.
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 Oh, time.
Time.
Of course it's time. I tried to make it harder than it was.
What is the number one reason when a husband and wife fight? When they have an argument, when they have a disagreement. If you dig deep down below the surface, the difference is always time. There's something, even if they want the same thing, one of them wants it now, usually a woman, just saying, and one of them saying, oh yeah, but not right now, okay? And, I think I gave the example last time, or maybe not, or maybe in the session that did not record, but it's like, oh, how long do you need? 5 minutes. Oh, I mean it figuratively.
Right.
Oh, no, I meant it literally. After 5 minutes, where are you? Time. Let's wrap it all up because it's an hour. Let's wrap. Time flew.
Time
We're having
flew.
fun, right? We're present. Let's tie it to the concept of Smarties and Wiseys.
Yes, please.
In the tree of life, if we look at the tree of life, we have Chokhmah and Binah. This is sort of this symbolizes the energy that animates our mind. And these two things are the 2 polarities of the mind. This is the positive polarity, and this is the feminine polarity, the
Negative.
the positive and the negative polarity. And so this is our conscious perception, which is always an amalgamation of the two. So Chokhmah means smart, Binah means wise, and so Smarties and Wiseys. Smarties are people who are ruled by, well, sort of. This is where it gets slightly complicated, okay? Smarties are people, I'm going to weigh my, I'm going to go back to time. Smarties are people whose time perception is slower than what time really is. Because time is a constant. We know that from Einstein. Einstein told us that time is a constant. Okay?
Right.
Time is determined by the movements of the planets in our solar system. It's not a man-made invention.
Right.
It's the division to 24 hours that is a man-made invention.
Right.
But time itself is not. So Smarties are people whose time perception is slower than what time really is, how fast time really moves.
Okay.
Wiseys are people whose time perception is faster. They always think time goes faster than what time really is. So where time really is? Time really is, that is, when I say time really is, I'm talking about the actual rhythm of time, is right smack here in the middle. This is when our perception of time is neither slow nor fast. So, when our time perception is slower, we're going this way, and this is the max that we can get, because this is the range with which time goes slower and the voluntary thought goes faster. And whenever we have to remember the law of polarity. Everything mirrors. Okay? So, I'm a Smartie, and this is in general a show for Smarties. So you too are a Smartie, Melissa.
Yeah.
I think we've determined that already multiple times.
Yep.
We're going to say this. Here we are. This is the quintessential, let's say, 75 percentile Smartie. So a Smartie, how do you recognize a Smartie? They're never on time, because, and if they are on time, it's like, they always track it using their watches,
Right.
Their time perception, their built-in time perception is not that great. So a Smartie is someone who is it did not break, is someone that's at this particular portion of the scale. Time perception is slower, the voluntary thought goes faster. That's why brainiacs, Smarties, always think. But what happens in the body? Well, we haven't said what's the difference between this side and this side in the body.
Right.
So it's a little hard to speak about that. And I'm not sure we have time.
No, probably not today.
Yeah, but something happens in the body in relationship to our time perception. And this will be something great to talk about next time.
Perfect.
But Wiseys are people whose time perception is faster than time itself, which means they're always in a hurry. And here's the Wisey at the 75 percentile. I don't know why I chose this color. Okay, so I'm going to write it like this. Just going to do. This is Wisey zone, and this is Wisey zone, and this is Smartie zone, and this is Smartie zone. Is that clear? Sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have chose better colors.
I think it's.
To indicate the
I don't know
difference.
how it looks on the camera. It's clear from here.
Yeah, it's decent. So the orange, I probably could have chose better colors. So whatever. Here. Purple.
Purple it is.
Purple for Smarties.
Orange for Wiseys.
Orange for Wiseys. Okay? Smarties anywhere here on the spectrum, the more this way you are, the more hardcore Smartie you are. And a Wisey is this way on the spectrum. I am just about here. Remember last time we spoke about the amount of light you used to see? And we said that the more you're here, the less light you used to see. I may be here on the Smartie spectrum. My wife is somewhere here on the Wisey spectrum. She's an abstract painter. That's why our language, last time we spoke about the difference in language and how language is tied to time, that's why it's so hard for us to communicate. Because my language, when I'm literal, literal, that is, when I'm speaking using the masculine mind, being literal, my language is always timeless. In her language, is always time-bound. So when she says, how long do you need? She wants to know exactly.
How many minutes?
When I say 5 minutes, I don't mean it literally. Why? Because when I speak, and here's your spectrum for the, we did it anyway. When I'm being time-bound, I am always figurative. Right?
Right.
It works. And so I say, 5 minutes. What I really mean is I need a little bit of time. Okay? And when she says, you're never on time, I take it literally.
Not one time have
Because
I ever been
never
on time.
is timeless.
Right.
Right? So I take it literal. Oh, timeless, I take it literally. No. When she means something timeless, she means it figuratively. And then I start saying, well, just yesterday I was on time. Well, stop lawyering me. She's being figurative. So right there we see the difference between Smarties and Wiseys.
Right.
And let me tell you, you watch the news. You say, last time we were here, I told you, think about language as a function of time. Timeless versus time-bound. The more timeless you are, the more abstract your speech becomes. And the more time-bound, the more concrete your speech becomes. Anybody wants these diagrams? They're all in my book, It's About Time. Go to Amazon, search for It's About Time, Aerez Batat, Aerez Batat, and you get all these diagrams. And it's explained step by step. When we were talking about speech, about language, start paying attention to speech. You're going to notice that the more timeless it is, the more abstract it is. Now, and the more time-bound it is, the more concrete it is, right? We were speaking about the difference between fruit and an apple. An apple is a lot more concrete than fruit.
Right.
And this apple, a green apple, is a lot more concrete than just apple, right? Now, watch the news. Watch the Congress interviewing Michael Cohen yesterday, right? Or today, was it yesterday?
Yesterday, yeah.
It doesn't matter where you go. You're going to see it everywhere. And I think I gave example in that episode that never got recorded.
Right.
That, what's her name? The White House Speaker.
Yeah.
The Speaker of, not the Speaker of the House, the White House Speaker.
Press Secretary.
Press Secretary. Her name is, two Smarties trying to remember her name. There's a reason. Do you know why? Because names are here.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Sarah Huckabee.
Sarah Huckabee, yes, something like that. Sarah Sanders.
Okay.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, or Sanders Huckabees, or whatever. Right?
Okay.
So on Martin Luther King Day, she sends a tweet.
Right.
What's the tweet saying? Oh, Martin Luther King gave his life. Now, let's analyze. Gave his life, is that an abstract, is that a figurative term or a literal term?
Figurative.
Figurative. Now, she's a wisey or a smarty? What do you think?
If she's using figurative language, then she's a wisey.
Is it an abstract term or a concrete term? Did he literally, or a literal term? Is it, well, it's not, it's figurative.
Yes.
Right? Is it time-bound or timeless? The term itself, gave his life.
It's not necessarily
Can you give
time-bound.
life?
No.
It's abstract.
Yeah.
Life itself is abstract.
Right.
So the second you say give his life, you can't give here's my life.
Here you go.
Take it.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So she's here. She's a wisey. Now, she's a wisey through and through. Everybody who works with Donald Trump is a wisey. Donald Trump is the quintessential wisey. If you want to see a wisey in action, see Donald Trump. Whether you like him or not, listen to how he's speaking, you're going to see a wisey. Okay? So he works with people who are wisies. Nancy Pelosi, smarty. That's why they don't speak the same language. I'm calling right here to HBO or to Netflix. I want to have a show called Trumpsy Pelosi, in which I put them both in the same room and I help them speak with each other. And I will show you that they speak two different languages, the language of a wisey and the language of a smarty. So Sarah Sanders, Huckabee, Wisey, Huckabee. Sarah. She's sending the tweet, and she means it figuratively and abstractly.
Okay.
And she's getting these people telling her, what do you mean gave his life? He was murdered. So they're taking it literally. Why? Because if you're a smarty and you're hearing something abstract, you're immediately hearing it literally, and you're saying, that's not what happened. He didn't give his life. His life was taken away from him. And this, and I'm not taking a political side here. I'm just saying we all speak different languages. And it's
that
true.
The root of the disagreement comes in the understanding of the language. All right.
So, what did we do today? Let's summarize.
All right.
Today we learned the basic structure of the mind. We've learned that we process reality not with one mind, but with two. A masculine and a feminine mind. And this masculine and feminine mind are operating completely differently in the dimensions of time and space. We're going to talk about time and space maybe next time. We didn't say it literally, but really what we're saying is, well, I'm not going to go there. I wanted to start a whole branch for next time, but we're not going to do it. But what we're saying is that we perceive reality with these two minds, and our conscious perception is really an amalgamation of these two. Now, for those of you who know that I work a lot with marijuana, and there's a new Facebook page called How Marijuana Works. It's the alias How 420 Works, because for some weird fucking reason, Facebook doesn't let me create a page with the word marijuana because it's a forbidden word. It's like, oh yeah, it doesn't exist, right? It's like using the word fuck. Fuck it, fuck. What the fuck, Facebook? Really? So it's How 420 Works, because people don't know what that is. It's figurative. It's not literal enough to not be there. But the page itself is called How Marijuana Works. And I show that we can speed up or slow down the speed of our voluntary thought stream of the masculine mind using marijuana. Now, why am I mentioning it? Because if you want to detect the two sides of your mind, but you're having a hard time doing so, you can smoke sativa dominant strain, and then you're going to be able to distinguish between the two very clearly. And there's a reason for that, because the sativa dominant strain will speed up your voluntary thought stream, will slow down your thought perception, you'll have the ability to think more in any given unit of time, which means you're going to have the ability to think about thinking. And if you're a wisey, you haven't watched this far, because to a wisey, all this is just mental masturbation, because only smarties can be literal and abstract, and think about the practical implications of all of this. We're already doing it in our minds, right? Of what it means to my relationship, and what it means to politics, and what it means to education.
So a wisey is not doing that?
No.
Oh.
Because they cannot imagine in their mind's eye, they cannot imagine, they cannot process, they cannot create literal derivatives of this information that are going to be concrete. It's too abstract. This is why my wife doesn't get what I do. It's too abstract. It's like, oh, okay, so what do I do with it? Well, for example, education. If we determine if our kids are smarties or wisies, what can we do with the education? Oh man,
yeah.
Right? The average wisey is not going to be like, it's going to be like, oh, what? What can you do? Okay, great. I have kids that are smarties and wisies. Oh, but don't you remember? Don't you understand that kids that are smarties are going to be better in sciences that are more abstract, and kids that are, and when it comes to figurative sciences, figurative art, they need to be more concrete. That means they're probably more likely to have functional art. And where's math? And where is history? Oh, history is names. Better for Wiseys, so on and so forth. We already do it in our mind.
Right.
Because we can do that, not because we are smarter. Why? Because we're Smarties.
Right.
But because we have the ability to process things abstractly, and so we do that in our mind algorithmically, and we already see the potential. But for a Wisey to see the value, it has to be concrete.
Okay.
That's why Wiseys are so good with money. That's why Wisey has to have something concrete. They're wise. Why? If you're wise, you manage time well, usually. Of course, there's always exceptions.
Sure, whatever.
But you manage time well, you manage money well, and you're very concrete. Okay? So yes, some people are smarter than others. Some people are wiser than others. When I ask Smarties, usually, what do you think you are, Smarty or a Wisey? A really sharp Smarty once told, actually your daughter, she said, I want to say that I'm a Wisey, but I think I'm Smarty.
Yeah.
We Smarties are not that wise.
No.
We're not. Why do we call them wise men? Like wise guys.
Right.
The quintessential wise guy in the mob is not exactly a Smarty.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, they didn't excel in school in the
traditional,
math and in the abstract sciences, right? So, enough for today. I want to thank you, Melissa, for your presence today. And do you have any questions?
A million, but I know they will continue to be answered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah. What do you like about it?
I like that it's all coming together in a really organized way. So this is all bits and pieces that we've talked about over time, but I like seeing it. I like it being laid out in a way that I can really connect the dots and put things together in my head in a way that works. So
good.
Yeah.
Good. I want to thank you all for watching thus far. If you had, please tell me what you think in the comments. Ask me questions in the comments. We're going to respond to them in subsequent episodes. A little bit of information if you want to know more. So on Facebook, the School of Practical Metaphysics, that's a Facebook page you can join. If you want more information about what we do in Consciousness Research Institute that is bringing you this episode today, go to CRIORG.institute. That's CRIORG.institute. To ask questions directly and interact, you can go to CRIORG.university. And to access this YouTube channel, you can go to CRIORG.tv. What else? And of course, How Marijuana Works on Facebook if you want to learn about how marijuana works. This was yet another episode number 2 of Teaching Melissa Until We Have a Better Name. That's Melissa. And I'm Aerez Batat, your host from Spokane, Washington, wishing you happy mental exploration. Unlock your mind.